All right. Jamming as usual. Welcome to the Sober Heathen podcast. I am sober. I am a heathen. I am Scott. Very excited for today. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Got a bunch of great interviews. Got another great one coming today. Super excited. We're going to get right into it. This is Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the podcast. Tell us where you're from and go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks, Scott. Yes, my name is Michelle. I'm from the UK, the northwest of England, and I'm 100 days sober tomorrow.
Woo!
Woohoo! And I find it quite unbelievable to say that, really. I have been nearly there before, quite a number of decades ago. I got to about 90 days then. I wasn't necessarily counting back then, but I knew after a particularly bad run of alcohol that I needed to give it a break, and I gave it a break for about 90 days back then. This time it feels more real. This time I've done a lot of growing up in that 2 decades. I've done a lot of drinking in those 2 decades. And something clicked, and I can't really explain what it was, but something clicked this time. And if I just briefly tell you what happened, what led me to day one.
Sure.
We'd had a family gathering for what would have been my granddad's 100th birthday. He died a couple of years ago, so the family thought it'd be nice to all get together and celebrate this really special, what would have been a really special day, his 100th birthday. And we did. We had fun. It was lovely having all the family together, parents, aunties, grandchildren, children. And I did what I normally do and consumed quite a few bottles of wine, and don't remember leaving the restaurant. I don't remember getting home. I do remember continuing to drink when I got home. Um, um, and then I remember waking up. And I remember waking up thinking, oh God, what's gone on? What's happened? I'm sure all your listeners will understand that feeling. I
Sure.
remember waking up covered in bruises. I had a massive bruise on my hand and no recollection of how I got it. So I staggered downstairs, and my husband and my son and my grandson, 9-year-old grandson, was there because we'd had him overnight that evening. And bleary-eyed, hungover, all the usual anxiety that comes with that. And the thing that really resonated with me that morning, and what really made me think twice about this whole thing, was my 9-year-old grandson said to me, Nanny, I think you were very drunk last night.
Oof,
And sorry, Scott, I may get emotional on this podcast.
that's okay.
Um, and I still find that so soul destroying, even now, to think about it, that I let myself to get in such a state, to be in such a state that I don't even remember being in that state in front of my 9-year-old grandson. For
Mm.
him to have witnessed that. And I know he wouldn't have witnessed anything aggressive or anything like that, because that's not the kind of drunk I am. I'm a loud, fun, over the top kind of drunk. But I also can get with my husband, and this is another where I'll probably get emotional. With my husband, I can get a bit argumentative and a bit aggy.
Sure.
But on that night, we'd been play fighting and whatever else, and hence why I got all those bruises. So that was the day after this party, this birthday celebrations. So that day we had both grandchildren. I have 2 grandchildren. That day we got both grandchildren, and again, most listeners will resonate with this. I limped through that day. My head was pounding, I was feeling sick, I wanted to be anywhere other than with 2 noisy grandchildren. Made it through to the evening part, got to about 4 or 5 o'clock-ish, and I thought, I'm going to have to take something to get rid of this. I'm going to have to do something to move this on. And the only thing I was thinking of was, I need another glass of wine. Another glass of wine will move this on.
Right on.
And we were staying at my daughter's house, so I'd opened her fridge, and my daughter's poison is Sauvignon Blanc, which is not mine. That really is poison to me. I don't like it. Mine. I've always been a Chardonnay drinker, but I was desperate, and I thought, no, I'll just drink it. I just need it. I need to take something that will take the edge off all these hangover symptoms that I've got. So I poured this wine, and I mean, even the smell of Sauvignon Blanc, I don't like. Anyway,
Sure.
I went to take a sip of this drink, and I did take the sip, and I just thought, what am I doing? What am I actually doing? You are taking a drink of the poison that got you in this place got you here in the first place, made you feel like you feel right now in the first place. You were taking a drink of this poison that made you feel so ashamed just this morning when your grandson said to you, Nanny, I think you were really drunk last night. And yet there you are with it to your lips again. And it really felt like an epiphany moment in that immediate moment. It was, I haven't, in all the times I've tried to abstain, Scott, which have been many, it was the first time that I viscerally felt something. I felt something really deep inside that said, what are you doing? So I poured that drink down the sink, and I haven't touched a drop since.
Wow.
And that really, people talk about rock bottoms when I've listened to podcasts and I've read, literature on it and things like that. And I know everyone's rock bottoms are different and everyone's day ones are different.
Sure.
But that for me was my day one. And I think the way I've got to day 100 is by having 100 day ones. I never intended to get to 100 days. I never thought that's it now. I never poured that wine down the sink and thought that's it, I'm never touching it again. Or I never thought, right, I'm going to do 3 months, or I'm going to do 100 days. Those thoughts at that time never crossed my mind. I just thought, I'm tipping this down the sink and I'm not drinking it. And then the day after, I woke up and thought, I'm not drinking today, which again is unheard of because I would drink every day.
Yeah.
I was a moderate drinker during the week. I would be. I have a professional job. I can't go to work. Can't go to work drunk. I can't go to work smelling a drink. And for some reason or other, and this is, on my journey I'm in at the moment, I'm really spending a lot of time self-reflecting on how I've got where I am and why I am who I am, and why can I moderate and control myself when I know I've got to get up and go to work and like have 1 glass of wine, but come Friday to Sunday can't stop.
Sure.
The bottle of the wine, the lid of the bottle of wine opens, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? That whole bottle of wine will definitely go. If not, the opening of a second will. So I've got a lot of work to do to try and unpick why that is. Why could I control on a, say, Wednesday, but can't control and moderate on a Friday, Saturday? And I don't know if listeners will have noticed, but like my Twitter handle says sober curious, and it also says hopefully sober.
Sure.
And that's literally how I set off. That's, I set off. I'd read a couple of, sober books probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And, some bits had resonated with me, and things like that. And I was curious way back then. I was probably curious 10 years ago. So I set off again, curious, what's out there. I think what I wanted to know, Scott, and I don't know if you've come across this, but it felt like to me, and again, I don't know if other people have had this, it felt like to me there was only one option, and that was AA.
Sure.
And I didn't know, or I didn't think that I was, and I don't know if this sounds right or doesn't sound right, that I was bad enough for AA. I didn't want to walk into an AA meeting and say, my name is Michelle and I drink 4 bottles of wine at the weekend, or I drink, 5 bottles of wine over a week, and yet there's somebody drinking that I don't know, 5 bottles of vodka over a weekend. And I didn't want to do a disservice to those people that were in those AA meetings who, you know, was really, really struggling. And like, I think you may have seen this on my Twitter feed as well. I have 2 brothers that are chronic alcoholics. You know, they physically are dependent on alcohol. I've got one brother who's about to start his 3rd detox in May. And I've got my other brother is just over 12 months sober.
Awesome.
So, and I've seen the impact of their alcoholism throughout my life for 20 plus years. You know, they would wake up, well, you know, the first thing, they would take drinks to bed, ready for when they opened their eyes. Do you know what I mean? They literally could not function without having an alcoholic drink the minute they woke up and until the minute they collapsed in bed. So, and I think in some ways that skewed my idea of a drink problem. So my idea of a drink problem was of the level of my brothers. And again, when I reflect, it also rose my bar of how much I could drink. So, well, I'm not as bad as my brothers. My brothers need a drink as soon as they open their eyes in the morning. I've got a hangover. Yeah, but my brothers are permanently hungover. You know, they're hungover from Monday to Sunday, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. My brothers can't rock up to the family meal because they're too drunk. Do you know what I mean? Because they're permanently drunk. So it skewed what my idea was of an alcohol problem. But I feel like I've had my eyes opened massively in this last 100 days. And it's one of those things, once something's been seen, it can't be unseen. And that's where I feel, you know, that's where I feel I am at you know, at the moment, really, is I know that I can't drink again. And that's quite a sobering statement to say. I've just had this conversation with my husband because interestingly, I just recently bought the AA book. I wouldn't have labelled myself an alcoholic. It's one thing I wouldn't have done. I label my brothers alcoholics, but I wouldn't label myself as an alcoholic.
Sure.
But then I'm in my early days into the AA book, but I can see myself in that book, which is surprising one, interesting in another, scary in another.
Yes.
All those words you can think of, and I would encourage people who are on this path or are on this journey and searching for answers and support is don't dismiss AA. I did. It had bad. It had. You know, I don't know if it's the same, but in the UK, sometimes it gets a bad press in the UK. My brother's tried AA a number of times and it hasn't worked for them. It could be the wrong group, you know, and all those other reasons. But I just think if for me, the way I work, if I'm serious about doing something, I do it. I'm all in. And, you know, I'm serious about not drinking again. And I feel like I need to know as much information as I possibly can. So that can be AA, it can be all the other forms of recovery that are out there, because we know that one form of recovery is not the answer for one person. You know what I mean? So what I want to do is I want to equip myself with as much information about this horrible, soul destroying, life destroying disease as I can, so that I can decide which path I'm going on, how I stay on that path, and how I continue to enjoy life that like I have done over the last 100 days. I don't know if that's a good enough start there.
Oh my gosh, good enough. Jeez, I'm sitting here and you're talking about, you know, standing at the refrigerator, you know, looking at this bottle and, you know, I got to do this. I mean, I could see myself doing that. I had an image of you standing in front of that thing and like, I hate this stuff, but I got to do it. like your mind is telling you, I have to do it. I mean, absolutely that. I mean, I saw everything in my mind as you were speaking. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, that was fantastic. Geez, so many notes, so many great things. I wrote down there, you needed something, you just knew, you woke up, you felt like crap, and you just needed something, I can relate to that. I mean, waking up in the morning and just feeling like absolute poop. And I remember, and I wanted to ask you if this is something that ever happened to you with the wine. I wasn't a wine drinker, but if it was there and I had nothing else, you bet your ass I was drinking it. Um, did you ever wake up in the morning? Because I know I did this. I can remember one time I woke up, I felt like crap. I was still kind of buzzed, I think. And I got up and I walked around my bed to my computer and I kicked this bag and I was like, ouch. And I got down, I opened the bag and I grabbed it and it was either a full pint or fifth of alcohol. And I literally did a fist pump in the air, like, yes, I don't have to go anywhere to get started this morning. You ever do that? Do you ever wake up and leave alcohol behind? And I'm just curious. I don't know why I thought to ask you this, but with the bottles of wine, did you ever wake up and have some left over and be
No,
ridiculously excited?
not yeah, I can imagine that. Not to that extent, but what we did um when COVID was here and obviously we were all locked down, um we'd go my husband and I go on our weekly hourly walk or whatever it is we were allowed to have, and we'd go to the shop and we'd obviously pick up wine. But I'd said to him, pick up an extra bottle just in case. Just pick up
Mm,
an extra bottle just in case. Just in case, because it was all over the news where we were that all the white wine shortages and white wine was going and all the rest of it. And I didn't want the thought of us not having any in the house. So, and again, going back to COVID, um, COVID, it's hard to know whether to blame somebody for this, is there, or something for this. I don't, and again, I'm still working through that. I'm still
sure.
working through what the whys. But when COVID hit us and we were like meetings were on Zoom, so and I normally travel to work for about an hour, so I didn't really have to do that. So I wasn't worried about drink driving. I wasn't worried about anyone smelling any alcohol on my breath. So I was definitely having a bottle of wine a night, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, more on a Friday, Saturday. And again, it all rings true now when I correlate my actions with what I've read, what that did was push my tolerance level up.
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID then reduced and lockdown stopped and life kind of resumed to some kind of normality, I was still very good at controlling what was happening through the week. I would never have more than a glass or so during the week. I never went to bed drunk during the week. I never woke up hungover during the week. But come Friday, then that bottle of wine. Well, I'd been having a bottle of wine on a Wednesday, so come Friday, a bottle of wine wasn't enough.
Sure.
So it was a bottle of wine plus come Friday, then more on Saturday. So I recognise now that COVID put my tolerance level through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas a couple of glasses of wine would get me tipsy, nicely feeling nice, I've got the buzz and all the rest of it, it would take me a bottle of wine to get that feeling.
Yeah.
So I think what the thing is, the problem we've got, and again, I don't know if this is the same in other places, but everyone's doing it, and this is what I felt like. This is why it's took me so long to get where I am,
Sure.
because everyone is doing it. You know what I mean? Everyone's getting drunk at the weekend. Everyone's got a hangover at the weekend. It's what and then it's what you do, and it's like it's a bit of a badge of honor. You know what I mean? You go to a
Mm-hmm.
party on a Friday, and then you've got your hangover stories on the Saturday via WhatsApp. Oh God, I'm rough today. How are you? Oh, I've been sick all night. Oh no, have you? And it's it kind of allows it to happen. It's almost like a high
Yeah.
five. Oh yes, Michelle's throwing up. Do you know what I mean? It's scary. It's really scary. And it's like I said, it's only when you see it but you
Sure.
can't it's only when you see it, you can't unsee it. I can't ever imagine being back there again. And and in some ways I'm only 100 days in, but in other ways I'm fantastically 100 days in.
Absolutely.
But I still viscerally can remember those hangovers and how it feels, and just not just physically, but
Mhm.
mentally, how those hangovers feel. And there's nothing at the moment that could make me feel like that ever again. Ever again. Nothing at the moment would ever make me feel like that ever again. And I think the work I'm putting in now is to make sure, or to do the best I can to make sure that resolve I feel at the moment stays as strong as it is. Because, like, we were talking before, you know, you can get a good few months in, and I've read this, and I've seen people's tweets, and I've read it, where people get a good few months under the belt, they get years under the belt, and then this curveball comes, and they're knocked off their feet. And and I'm not naive enough to think that won't happen. What I want to be able to do is have enough tools in my box so that if that happens,
Mhm.
I'm equipped, to deal with that. That's what I'm striving for. That's what I'm working towards. And I think what I've learned this time round, compared to was it about 2 decades ago? Yes, it was my husband's. Yes, it's 2 decades ago. It's 20 years ago. Really bad hangover. I drunk 2 litres of white wine. Then started on the Jack Daniels with my brothers. Not a good night,
Hmm.
not a good morning.
Yeah.
I'd drunk that much white wine that I'd actually become allergic to it for a while. So anytime I drank white wine, I came out in hives. At
Oh,
the
wow.
time, at the time, didn't realize it was what it was, and then we'd made this connection. So even if I had chicken in white wine sauce, whatever, I'd come out in hives, and that lasted for quite a while. And I just thought, you know what, end of. So again, like I said, I'd give up for about 3 months. But what I didn't do 2 decades ago, maybe maturity, maybe it wasn't out there, maybe it wasn't out there for you to know you could do it, and it probably wasn't 2 decades ago, was the research behind alcohol, the research behind alcoholism. Do you know what I mean? And
Sure.
that's what's different for me 2 decades on. 2 decades on, I want to understand why. 2 decades on, I want to know the impact alcohol is having on my body, what the impact alcohol is having on my mind, on my mental health, on my brain, and why it's got hold of me, like it's got hold of me.
Sure.
I spoke to my husband about it. He's my favorite. He's my best supporter, by the way. I would
Awesome.
not be here. It wouldn't be here without him. He's absolutely amazing. And you know, it was getting to a stage where he was getting worried about the level. It wasn't so much how often I was drinking; it was how much I was drinking when I was drinking.
Sure.
And he was starting to get concerned. I was blacking out most times, most weekends. I was having significant accidents, and getting so many bruises. I mean, that's one of the nicest things about being sober. I have no bruises. Hey,
Right.
permanently lived. My whole body was just full of bruises. Um, so he's been an amazing support. But yeah, so that's where I am really. I'm confident. I'm confident I'm on this path for the long term. I'm not going to be naive. I've got a couple of big events coming up this year. My daughter gets married. So, that's going to be a tough day, but I'm not worrying about it now. There's no point worrying about it now. There's months to go yet. I'll handle that day when the day comes. I'll know I've got my husband's support by my side, so that'll be good. All my children now know where I'm at, and they're all very
Oh, good.
supportive. Yeah,
Good.
they're all very supportive. I was nervous at the time of having those conversations with them, because again, they know their uncles. So when you talk about somebody with an alcohol problem, they see they envisage their uncles and what alcoholism
Right.
looks like that. So they
Hmm.
look at me and they don't see that somebody who has an alcohol problem. But when I'm
Oh,
nearly falling through a glass shower curtain because I'm too drunk,
yeah.
they're not seeing that side of me when I'm 2 bottles of wine in at the
And
weekend.
yeah, and we learn to hide it very, very well.
Yeah.
I mean, the appearance may be that we're not that bad, but some
Hmm.
of us are really good at deception. I had a buddy, we went golfing one time and we got like 8 beers to go golfing and I had one. And he's like, see, dude, he's like, you're not an alcoholic. Well, he didn't see me every time that he was texting on his phone. I'd go behind the cart and pull out the bottle of peppermint schnapps that I had in my golf bag.
Yeah.
We learn how to deceive people. And I think you mentioned some really great things. Skewed my view of an alcoholic, what an alcoholic is. Some people, I have, it's a family disease. Okay. So, I mean, it is hereditary. So your brothers are obviously suffering. My view of an alcoholic was skewed as well because the alcoholics in my family were peeing their pants and they were, their outward appearance looked terrible. I didn't look terrible. I wasn't peeing my pants. You know, that alone skewed my view of alcoholism. And then you made another good point too about AA and walking in. And I think it's very important for people to understand this is a progressive disease, right?
Hmm.
So you started at a certain level and ended at a certain level. And if you or I decide to go back, well, I can't speak for you, but I know if I go back and from the evidence that has been given to me, I'm going to pick up right where I left off. There's
Hmm.
no going back to just having some beers on the weekend and then working my way back up. Um, it's progressive disease. Walking in and seeing, having this perception of what an alcoholic is, that bum on the street, with a paper bag and sitting in a corner and drinking is that's that's not really. I don't believe that's an authentic view of what an alcoholic is. I think you and I are more of
Hmm.
the everyday alcoholic.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, I totally agree with you, Scott. And I think the scary thing is that I know so many people that could identify as alcoholics. Do you know what I mean? Because my drinking is no different to a lot of other people who I know and
Mhm.
socialise with, and have worked with in the past and things like. You know, the drinking's very similar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's things like it's the units, like so people say, oh, I only have a couple of drinks tonight, but they might be 2 large drinks. So how many
Sure.
units are in those? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not
Yeah.
quite sure. And I'm not quite sure what your recommended is over in the States, but like over here in England, ours is 14 units a week for male or female. Well, 14 units a week. I'm sorry, but you know what I mean? It's like I
Yeah.
might as well not bother. If I'm only going to have 14 units a week when I was drinking, I might as well not bother drinking.
Right.
14 units a week is nothing. And I did have it. Alarm bells were there. I remember going to the dentist, probably about 12 months ago, 18 months ago, and you feel that forming. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Do you smoke? Do you drink? What do you drink? And all the rest of it. We all lie about how much we drink. And I must have
Yeah.
put something on the form that sparked the dentist to ask me something. And and he said, so how much do you drink then? So I thought, oh, right, okay. I said, oh, about three bottles a week. And I thought that's quite conservative, really, over a week,
Sure.
3 bottles a week. And he nearly gave himself whiplash. Do you know what I mean? He nearly fell off his chair. He went 3 bottles a week. And I thought, oh gosh, do you know what I mean? So there's there were alarm bells there, but then also a counter story to that, Scott, was I went for a health check with the nurse. You get to a certain age, you're not quite there yet, Scott. You get to a certain age and you have to have these health checks, and again, similar questions. So they did your heart, blood pressure, and how much do you smoke, do you drink, blah blah. And I'd mentioned, I like a drink with my tea, and I might have this at the weekend, and all the rest of it. And all my results came back fine, all fit and healthy.
Mm.
And she said, oh well, she says, if wine's your only advice, if wine is your only advice, I wouldn't worry about it. She
Uh,
says, you know what I mean? So, and that's a medical professional. Do you know what I mean?
yep.
And I'd highlighted the same amount of alcohol consumption, the same amount of units that I'd mentioned to the dentist, and yet the nurse was quite blasé about it. Like, you know what I mean? So it's ignored. It's not. It should be on people's radar more. You know what I mean? It was obviously on the dentist's radar, but it wasn't on the nurse's radar.
Yeah, and he must know something. You know, he must have a little more education or experience in that, because it is you know, those tests can be deceiving. You know, I had high blood pressure and that was it. Everything else was pretty good. I was way overweight and plump or whatever. But as soon as you got blood tests and they came back fine, that was me. That was sign off on just keep doing what I'm doing. You know, you mentioned the drink thing. It's funny. When it first started to get really out of hand, I was drinking 4 half pints a night, and you said, you know, people would say that's like 4 huge drinks. You know, it could be just 2 drinks, but they're huge. You know, I would drink each one of those half pints in one shot. I'd tip it up until the bottle was gone. So I mean, I could have said I had 4 drinks a night. You know, and people would just be like, "Oh yeah, nothing fine." It's funny in the medical field, the lack of knowledge that they have about this disease. You know what I mean? It's quite alarming. Man, good stuff. You know, you'd mentioned too that you're trying to figure out the why, and you've read the big book, so now you've read and you've heard
through it. I've already just got it, Scott. So
okay, yeah. Well,
I've just got it. I've just gone past there's a chapter about alcoholism, and then I'm just about to start the chapter about agnostics. So I'm quite early days into it, but like I said, I'm surprisingly enjoying the book. I'm surprisingly getting a lot out of the book.
Yeah, it's really good. And you know, it'll tell you, if you haven't you know, that alcohol was a solution to our problems. That was, you know, alcohol is but a symptom. I'm sure you got into that part where it's just a symptom of something else. So, you know, we're choosing this alcohol to deal with things that we haven't 100%. Dealt with before.
100%. And that's what I did. I used wine, and interestingly, I only drank wine. So if I had no wine in and there was gin, I just probably wouldn't have anything. Well, I was obsessed with white wine. But yeah, I would use wine for everything. It was like a painkiller. It was everything. So if I had a headache I couldn't shift, I'd have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
If I was feeling a bit down in the dumps, I'd have a glass of wine. If I was elated and happy, I'd have a glass of wine. So no matter if I'd had a bad day, straight to the wine. If I'd had a brilliant day, straight to the wine. It was, you're totally right. And what I've had to learn in these last 100 days is to deal with those emotions and those events sober. And some days I've been more challenging than others. But I'd rather cope with the challenge of doing them sober than not being sober.
Absolutely. And then everybody that I didn't believe in the beginning that said it's so much easier to deal with this stuff sober, things that you thought would never be fun sober are still fun. You know, everything they said was right.
Yeah, and you totally, because I mean, when I've wanted to give up before, it's like, oh, I can't give up. My life will just be so boring. I can't give up. What will I do at the weekend?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And my first couple of Fridays driving home from work were as miserable as sin. You know, that drive home from work, I would be grumpy, I would be irritable, I would be, what's the point of the weekend? I might as well be at work. And, you know, those first few Fridays were quite difficult. But I love my weekends now. I can't wait for Fridays.
Right.
I wake up and I'm hungover free. I sleep like a baby. Literally, you can't explain unless you're talking to somebody who is sober what sober sleep feels like. I've taken back up with the gym. I was there this morning, and my daughter came over to pick up with a grandchild, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know how you can do it on a Sunday morning like that," but I'm like, "No, I'm wearing to go." So yeah, I don't know what you call it over there in the States. We call it a pub crawl. Do you have anything like that over in the States where you go from one pub to the other
Oh
to the
yeah.
other and
And we
just to
call it a
get
pub
wasted?
crawl. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
and just
call
get wasted.
it.
Yeah, so I just get wasted. So when I decided to go sober, we'd already got a pub crawl booked in for our social calendar, and I thought, do I make an excuse and not go? And it was a couples thing, so it's my husband and a load of friends. And I thought, no, I've got to do this. I've got to live life. I can't take myself out of life. I can't take my husband
Yep.
out of his life. And so I've got to live life. So we went on the pub crawl. And Scott, seriously, I've not laughed that much in my life. I cried laughing. It was so funny,
Awesome.
and it was really good. And obviously the added benefit to that is to wake up the day after, and you're hungover free, and everybody else is hanging because they're all hungover and all the
Sure.
rest of it. But yeah, it's you're totally right. You think, and there's always an excuse. I can't do that because I've got somebody's wedding coming up. I can't do that because I've got this happening, and I can't do that. But you do. I'm trying to think if there's an event. I'm trying to think if there's an event that's happened in the 100 days that I've not enjoyed because I was sober, and I seriously cannot think of one. I
Yeah.
went to London. I went to London with family for 4 days. We had afternoon tea at the Ritz. There was champagne galore, and I stuck with my non-alcoholic drinks, and I still had the most amazing time, and it's one of the best memories I've had. So anybody out there thinks, if anybody is listening, thinking, I can't do that because life will be so boring, life
Yeah.
won't be fun anymore, it's wrong. Life is
Yeah.
just as fun. It's, you know what I mean? But life is hard as well, you
It
know.
is. It
So,
is.
but that is life. But you just got to, you're just doing it without the crutch of alcohol.
Absolutely. And I can't say enough um what it's like. I wake up now in the morning, coming up on 8 months. I wake up in the morning and
Fantastic.
it's a reset.
Yeah,
Like everything that was bothering me yesterday that would have dwelled on for days or more in my alcoholism, I wake up now and it's like that weight is gone. It's a reset, it's a refresh. It's man,
liberating. It's liberating.
it
I
is.
think that's the way. It really is liberating. And um, my regret, and I'm trying not to have regrets. I've always said I'm trying not to have regrets.
Sure.
Is a wish I could have done it 20 decades, two decades earlier when I first went and did that 90 days. But it is what it is, and I am where I am.
Sure.
And all I can do is move forward to where I am now. One thing I was going to say about alcohol, Scott, which might help people that listen or try and identify with alcohol, is I liken and we talk about alcohol being a progressive disease, is I liken my alcohol problem to a coercive relationship. I was in a coercive relationship marriage about my first marriage many years ago. And, you know, just like that marriage and just like alcohol, it started off fun, started off okay. Yeah, you might wake up in hangover and feel a bit rubbish. You might have a row and feel a bit rubbish, but you forgive each other the day after, everything's fine. And then slowly but surely, you lose control.
Sure.
So, like, just like my first marriage, slowly but surely, I lost control and someone started to control me as opposed to the other way around. And that I now can vividly see that was my alcohol journey.
Yeah.
It slowly but surely took control away from me, and it was controlling me, and I was no longer controlling it. And I am a bit of a control freak, so for me, not to be in control is not comfortable for me. So and that was an eye opener when I compared it to the space I was in my first marriage, and I likened it to what alcohol is and how long it took me to get out of that first marriage, that coercive control marriage.
Sure.
I'd leave and go back. I'd leave and go back. I'd leave and think it'd be better next time, and it
Yeah.
never, ever was. And that's the same with alcohol. You leave and go back and leave and go back. It never ever changes. It never
No.
changes. It's still
No.
there, and as soon as you go back, it's in control again.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's amazing how it tries to, you only can remember the good.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you like, oh, all these great times, and you forget about all the bad times, you know. And that's an interesting segue to, we're not going to close on this because this is, you know, it choked you up a little bit talking about this, but I think it's important to face these things. You know, my kids would have been around 8. Your grandson was 9. My kids would have been around 8 when this happened. There's a video that I never knew that happened, that my ex-fiance showed me. It was me, just bloated and disgusting, sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner, feeling like crap. And my son's crying in this video. And he's saying to Miley, you know, why does this always happen? Why does my dad always not feel good when we're here? And he didn't, I think he knew, but he didn't maybe fully understand. But like, I wouldn't do things because I didn't feel good because I was fucked up and you know, feeling
yeah,
like shit. And he's crying, you know, my dad, you know, it's, and the disease wants me to forget those things,
yeah,
and remember all the times that, oh, I was super cool dad and did this while I was drunk. But there's way more bad than the good, and that's the craziness of this disease.
yeah, definitely. And for that reason, I've kept a diary. Interestingly,
Mm-hmm.
for the first 30 days, I didn't. For the first 30 days, I didn't write it down because I don't think I really realized that this is what I was going to do. So I'm a bit gutted. I missed writing those first 30 days down, really. But
Yeah.
since the first 30 days, I've been writing down, and on some days there's nothing to write because there just isn't. So what I will do is I'll recall a really bad episode. I'll recall a really bad time when I was drunk and the state I was in and the impact that had on mainly my husband. So you know what I mean, and because I don't
Yeah.
want to forget bad times, Scott, I would, you know what I mean. At the
Yeah.
moment, they're still fresh in my mind, but in
Yep.
1,000 days' time, they might not be as fresh in my mind. But I want
No.
to make sure they remain fresh in my mind.
Yep.
So for that reason, I do keep a diary of how I feel and just how bad things I'd got. And again, we talk about it being a progressive disease and it was only going to get worse. And I 100% know that it was only going to get worse. And I don't want to be known as the drunk nanny.
Right.
So when I've got one grandchild who's 9, I've got one that's 2. I don't want to be the butt of their jokes. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like when they're teenagers and we go out for the family meal and there's Nanny, look at her staggering around. Oh, look, Nanny's drunk again. I don't want to be that person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be that memory,
Yeah.
because you'll know with your children, Scott, you've got a very finite time with these children.
Hmm.
And I've got a very finite time with my grandchildren. I don't want them to remember me drunk.
Oh yeah.
That's not what the memory I want them to have of me.
No. No, my kids were just learning to walk a couple days ago, it feels like. And I
Yeah,
just turned 21 a couple days ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't want to miss anymore, and I will not miss any more
yeah, excellent.
time, you know. And you know, in treatment they called it playing the tape. And I think journaling, I didn't understand how important journaling was. I don't journal now, as far as writing, but I call them the Sober Heathen video diaries. I'll get on and I'll talk about what's going on in my head, and I will watch those videos back, you know, periodically. Treatment, they said, you know, play the tape. And so I think that's a good review. The big book says we don't regret the past, nor do we want to shut the door on it. Because
Mhm.
you shut the door on it, then you're forgetting all the crap that you're trying
Yeah,
to avoid, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'm really happy that you got the big book and you're getting into it. Here's another one that to check out. You probably can't see it because the light in here, but it's called The Search for Serenity and How to Achieve It. And this is another book that they gave us that kind of it's aligned with the big book a little bit. It's by Lewis F. Presnell, and this book is every bit as good as the big book, the first 164 pages of the big book, in my opinion. So The Search for Serenity by Lewis F. Presnell is absolute must for people in early recovery. It's a fantastic book. So check that out.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. I've written that down. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this was fun, you know, and um, you know, I appreciate your recovering out loud today. And you know, those emotional times when you're thinking about those things, don't feel bad for that. For me, owning it, You know, I not everybody wants to get on and put their face on here and talk about their crap like I do, but I that's what works for me. And you talked about that too. You know, it's not the same for everybody. Right now, this is what's working for me. I'm gonna air all my shit out here for everybody to hear and see, and that's what works for me. And you're doing what's working for you, because it is not easy to get to 100 days. And
Yeah, thank you.
and you said you weren't even sure that this is what you want to do. You know, Jack is another guy that was on the
Yeah.
podcast, and he's the same. Do I really want to do this? You know, is this sobriety really my thing? And it sounds like that it's your thing for you. And I'm you know, it means nothing from a dude that's this far away, but I'm proud of you to get on here and do this. You know, you're sober curious on Twitter. Keep your curiosity going. You're doing great.
Thanks so much, Scott. And you know, I saw you. You know, I do follow you on Twitter, and I do like to keep in touch. You know, keep up with what you're up to. And I know other people have said this. I've listened to Jack's podcast and Richie's, and thank you for what you do. And you know, and I know the others have said that, and genuinely mean it. And I, you know, I say it to my husband. You know, he's my number one fan and supporter. But
Yeah.
yourself and Jack and Rich and all the others on that recovery posse group, I've never come across anything like that on Twitter ever in my life. They are an amazing bunch of people, and I wish every single one of them all the best on their own journeys of this horrible disease. But thank you for today.
Yeah, and thank you so much, and give your husband a hug from me.
Oh.
To have a supporter like that, you know, my ex-fiance, she might not be my fiance today, but she's still my best friend and my number one supporter. And you know, I don't know what I'd do without her. You know, I have a lot of great support, you know, but she's my number one fan. So I know how important that is. So give him a hug for me. Tell him I said thank you for being there for Michelle, and keep fighting the good fight and stay in touch. And how about we, you know, 200 days, you come back and tell us what's happening.
Will do. It's a date.
All right. This has been great, Michelle. Thank you so much. Best wishes to you and yours. And we'll talk soon. Okay.
Cheers. Thank you, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Bye.